Mark Twain recalls his most offensive speech. I vaguely remember some of the details of that gathering. Dimly I can see 100 people. No, perhaps 50. Shadowy figures sitting at tables feeding, ghosts now to me, and nameless forevermore. I don't know who they were, but I can very distinctively see, seated at the grand table and facing the rest of us, Mr. Emerson, supernaturally grave, unsmiling, Mr. Whittier, grave, lovely, his beautiful spirit shining out of his face, Mr. Longfellow with his silken white hair and his benignant face, Dr. Oliver Wendell Holmes, flashing smiles and affection and all good fellowship everywhere like a rose diamond whose facets are being turned inward toward the light, first one way and then the other. A charming man, and always fascinating, whether he was talking or whether he was sitting still. What he would call still, but what would be more or less motion to other people. I can see those figures with entire distinctness across this abyss of time. Now at that point ends all that was pleasurable about that notable celebration of Mr. Whittier's 70th birthday, because I got up at that point, with what I have no doubt I supposed would be the gem of the evening, the gay oration above quoted from the Boston paper. I had written it all out the day before and had perfectly memorized it, and I stood up there at my genital and happy and self-satisfied ease and began to deliver it. Those majestic guests, that row of venerable and still active volcanoes, listened, as did everyone else in the house, with attentive interest. Well, I delivered myself of, we'll say, the first 200 words of my speech. I was expecting no returns from that part of the speech, but this was not the case as regarded the rest of it. I arrived now at the dialogue. The old miner said, "You are the fourth. I'm going to move." "The fourth what?" said I. He answered, "The fourth literary man that has been here in 24 hours. I am going to move." "Why, you don't tell me," said I. "Who were the others?" "Mr. Longfellow, Mr. Emerson, Mr. Oliver Wendell Holmes, can sound the lot." Now then, the house's attention continued, but the expression of interest in the faces turning to sort of black frost. I wondered what the trouble was. I didn't know. I went on, but with difficulty. I struggled along, and entered upon that miner's fearful description of the bogus Emerson, the bogus Holmes, the bogus Longfellow, always hoping, but with gradually perishing hope, that somebody would laugh, or that somebody would at least smile, but nobody did. I didn't know enough to give it up and sit down. I was too new to public speaking, so I went on with this awful performance and carried it clear through to the end, in front of a body of people who seemed turned to stone with horror. It was the sort of expression their faces would have worn if I had been making these remarks about the Deity and the rest of the Trinity. There is no milder way in which to describe the petrified condition and the ghastly expression of those people. When I sat down, it was with a heart which had long ceased to beat. I shall never be as dead again as I was then. I shall never be as miserable as I was then. I speak now as one who doesn't know what the condition of things may be in the next world, but in this one I shall never be as wretched again as I was then. Howells, who was near me, tried to say a comforting word, but couldn't get beyond a gasp. There was no use. He understood the whole size of the disaster. He had good intentions, but the words froze before they could get out. It was an atmosphere that would freeze anything. If Benvenuto Cellini's salamander had been in that place, would not have survived to put into Cellini's autobiography. There was a frightful pause. There was an awful silence, a desolating silence. Then the next man on the list had to get up. There was no help for it. That was Bishop. Bishop had just burst handsomely upon the world with the most acceptable novel, which had appeared in the Atlantic Monthly, a place which would make any novel respectable, and any author noteworthy. In this case, the novel itself was recognized as being, without extraneous help, respectable. Bishop was away in the public favor. He was an object of high interest. Consequently, there was a sort of national expectancy in the air. We may say our American millions were standing, from Maine to Texas and from Alaska to Florida, holding their breath, their lips parted, their hands ready to applaud, when Bishop should get up on that occasion, for the first time in his life speak in public. It was under these damaging conditions that he got up to make good, as the vulgar say. I had spoken several times before, and that is the reason why I was able to go on without dying in my tracks, as I ought to have done. But Bishop had had no experience. He was up facing those awful deities, facing those other people, those strangers, facing human beings for the first time in his life, with a speech to utter. No doubt it was well packed away in his memory. No doubt it was fresh and usable, until I had been heard from. I suppose that after that, and under the smothering pall of that dreary silence, it began to waste away and disappear out of his head like the rags breaking from the edge of a fog, and presently there wasn't any fog left. He didn't go on. He didn't last long. It was not many sentences after his first before he began to hesitate and break and lose his grip and totter and wobble, and at last he slumped down in a limp and mushy pile. Well, the program for the occasion was probably not more than 1/3 finished, but it ended there. Nobody rose. The next man hadn't strength enough to get up, and everybody looked so dazed, so stupefied, paralyzed, it was impossible for anybody to do anything, or even try. Nothing could go on in that strange atmosphere. Howells, mournfully and without words, hitched himself to Bishop and me and supported us out of the room. It was very kind. It was most generous. He towed us tottering away to some room in that building, and we sat down there. I don't know what my remark was now, but I know the nature of it. It was the kind of remark you make when you know that nothing in the world can help your case. But Howells was honest. He had to say the heartbreaking things he did say. That there was no help for this calamity, this shipwreck, this cataclysm. That this was the most disastrous thing that had ever happened in anybody's history. And then he added, "That is, for you, and consider what you have done for Bishop. It is bad enough in your case. You deserve to suffer. You have committed this crime, and you deserve to have all you are going to get. But here is an innocent man. Bishop had never done you any harm, and see what you have done to him. He can never hold his head up again. The world can never look upon Bishop as being a live person. He is a corpse." That is the history of that episode of 28 years ago, which pretty nearly killed me with shame during that first year or two, whenever it forced its way into my mind.